There we go. Hey, if everybody could just give me a good hello, hi there, welcome here, whatever, in the chat, that would be outstanding. Thank you all very much. Thank you for having another Monday evening taken up by this class. As we're heading into the home stretch, there's only a handful more classes left. I'd like to remind you that project number 4 is due next week. And obviously next week I'll be handing out project number 5, which is the last project for the class, which is the final and stuff. However, tonight we're going to be talking about filters. I know we did that last week, but filters are a very core feature of After Effects. And the other thing about the filters is I want to dive deeper and show you what subtle changes in their settings can do. As we were doing little things with the shatter last week, we're going to continue that trend and stuff. So for example, I want to talk about a very powerful filter, use it constantly, and it's a particle effect. Now for this, of course, I'm going to need a new composition. Just going to call this one. Oh, I can't break keys on the right keyboard. Would help. Now, one of the other things I want to point out, it really is important to keep the names of your project files, together and stuff, because it makes more sense to give these things logical names. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the particle effects. Now, there's several built-in ones with After Effects, and there's more expensive and very good ones you can buy as well. But we're going to do with just something simple. Like all filters, though, we must have a solid. So we're just going to go Layer, New, Solid, any color we want. I'm going to just choose a random color here, blue. And the reason I'm choosing a color is just to demonstrate that this filter is going to actually delete that color. So if we go into Effects, Simulation, you'll notice there's CC Particle World and CC Particle Systems 2. We're going to be using just tonight for this part of the evening, Particle World. Notice that, of course, all of my layer information, so if I had this on a photograph or video, it would vanish as well. There's a thing down here called the grid. We then have this thing in the center. Now, this filter does start the moment you actually hit play. And let me show you what it does. By default, straight out of the box. And that's what the default settings of Particle World do. It makes little particles. And we use it to make water, snow, you name it, smoke, fire, etc. The reason is it does a good job of randomization and it gives a very organic feel to things. Now the way the best description I've ever seen of Particle World, the way to describe it is, you'll see in the center here, there's a little red circle. Think of this as a garden hose and it's spewing out particles, okay? And the floor is there to help you line things up, and I'll demonstrate that a little bit later, what it does. But anyhow, so the particles come flaring out of that little garden hose. Right now the garden hose is facing the audience and facing the camera. So we have this wonderful little bit. Now let's talk about the settings for this. Try to get through a little too much. Get it together there. Okay, let's see if I can just, okay, other way. Much better. Okay, first things first. Okay, I'm going to skip over the grid and guides. We'll come back to that. The birth rate that you see here, which also has a little slider, is how many particles are made and cranked out of that garden hose I was describing. Obviously, the higher the number, the more you end up with that. The lower number, which can go really low, 0.01. And as you can see, can barely, almost nothing there. As a matter of fact, even though I did 0.1, it can't even register that on the little handout. I just hit reset, same thing. Longevity has to do with how long these things stay on the screen. They are you'll notice that they call this the birth rate. Way back when, they used to refer to this as the death rate, which was one of those things of not popular way of describing things. But obviously, if you crank this way down, you can see, barely on camera, that, they're not on screen long enough to even hit the lower end of the, thing. But if they stay on the screen a long time, they'll just keep going and going and going. So basically it is, how many do you want and how long do you want them to last? The producer is the garden hose. Hit stop. That's the little red circle there. And it's broken down to two parts. And it's easy to get these two parts confused, but try not to. Position XYZ is what it sounds like. This is where the garden hose is located literally on the screen. So you can have the particles come out anywhere. Now I'm manually grabbing it and moving it around. So I'm moving up, down, right, left. It's hard to do Z space at this point in time. But you can see you have little particles way out in the middle of nowhere. Alternatively, that's me moving the layer, not moving the... That was not a good... Then you have also what's the producer, the radius. That is literally the size of this garden hose. How many particles are you having things come out of? So right now I've got a little garden hose cranking out just a little bit. Let's try this again. There we go. But I can also make this any size I want or any direction. So if I make a really wide X one, the particles fall out over a wider area. I really did move the entire layer. There we go. Or I could make the vertical axis really tall. I can move them through 3D space with the Z. And each one of those gives me a very different look and feel. This filter has a lot of subtlety built into it. Hit reset. But in my instructions and handout on this, a lot of people unfortunately don't pay attention to the position versus radius, and will type in the numbers and go, why isn't it working? It's like, well, you're a little off. So it's important to keep these two things straight. Now, below producer is, of course, physics. Now, you should remember physics from last week when we were doing all the fun stuff with shatter. So velocity is exactly what it sounds like. It's how fast and hard are they coming out of that. So it's the difference between literally dribbling out of a garden hose. Oops. Huh. I didn't move it that time. To, hyperspeed. Okay, it's a little too zoomed in. Okay, let's try that again. So you can see velocity is really important in that respect. Reset that. Then, of course, we have inherent velocity is like how much is coming out when it's there. Gravity, on the other hand, is vastly more important because obviously right now it's 0.5 dropping down. One Earth gravity would be that. Now, here's the thing, is way back in older versions, let's see if we can do this, -1, we can do negative gravity. Unlike shatter last week where you actually had to choose an angle for the gravity, this one it definitely is positive and negative. Or you can even set this 0 gravity. Once again, everything's just coming out at the camera because there's nothing pulling it up or down. And then there's some resistance is what it sounds like. It is like resistance. is how do you contain it? What's the force against it? So velocity and resistance are opposites of each other. And by subtly playing with these things, you can get quite interesting because you can actually get, people holding fireballs and things like that by, you'll notice how ball-like that is right there. We made the gravity to 0, much more sphere-like, etc. And there's various angles and stuff that you can play with to do those sort of things. Okay, any questions so far? I realize I'm going through this rather quickly and I need to slow down. My apologies on that. But again, we're just going over the whole things before we actually start doing something with this. These are on, of course, my handout to brief description of each one of these areas. Okay, I'm not seeing any handout questions yet. How to find CC particle world. Effects, simulation, CC particle world. And don't forget also under your effects and presets area on the right hand side, you just go and there it is, which shows the 3 different built-in particle systems: particle playground, CC particle world, and particle systems 2. The original CC particle world is still, I think, one of the more powerful things to use for. Anyhow, then under this, physics, we have a thing called particles, which is exactly what it sounds like. This controls the size, shape, color. For example, it has a lot of built-in things. For example, you don't need just lines. You can make stars. You can make spheres, little balls, faded spheres, shaded, darkened and faded. Not much difference between the 2 of them. You have to play with the other things to get that. You also have a thing called bubble, which you can do a lot of cute things, particularly when you change the color. And then again, there's just lots of different shapes and fun things. One of my favorite ones actually is cubes. And, various other shades, confines. Very hard to see there. Of course, if I make it you'll see that this filter does wipe out that layer and make it a transparency layer, which makes it harder to see for that particular one. Squares. Now, the reason why these bottom ones textured is because I haven't told it that there is a texture. But if we're going to just do bubbles, yeah, there we go. I'll bring back the black. So unless you are using textured, which is an image you would import, this stuff wouldn't line up. I don't have this set up right now, so we're going to skip over that. Go back to stars for a second, just for variety's sake. Then, of course, they have a section here called birth size and birth rate. So, for example, you can start these out when they come out of the garden hose very small, and then as they go over time, they become bigger and bigger. Vice versa, or you can keep them all the same size. You can also set up a randomization of how many different sizes there are as they go, and their opacity as they go. And of course, there is also the color choices. You can actually make these things any color you want. Very, very similar color to white. Very different colors. And you set up, they start one color, go to or keep them the same color throughout the entire thing. So the color, again, is just, personal choice. Although when you do something like bubbles and stuff, you do, get something that looks pretty good there. Extra has, again, some oddball stuff in there, which we'll skip over for the time being. Oh. Let's see. There was one important thing I forgot. Hit reset, Eric. Under physics, there's a whole section here called animation, and I apologize for jumping over this. Right now it's set to explosive, but there are other types of animations of different ways that these particles can come out of that garden hose. Directional, cone, or like a water sprinkler on the front lawn or fountain. It's a good way to do a fountain. Of twirly, twirl and twirly. I always get them. You see, they're just different widths. Vortex. Want to do a tornado? That's where you get that one from. One called fire. Jet sideways. And various other bizarre choices. The one thing you should also notice is at 0, 0, 0, there's almost no particles. It takes a split second for them to appear. We solve this, by the way, if you want them on the screen all the time, is we just grab the layer and slide it to the left, so all the particles start before the camera does, and just extend this out, and then you're good to go, even from the beginning. But the other problem with doing that, of course, is when you're setting up your choices of different options, you often have to slide your play needle over so you can actually see the particles before you start. So keeping this on 0, 0, 0 for this filter does not help you out all that much. So again, just basically real fast. Birth rate, how many particles do you get? Longevity, how long do they stay on the screen? Producer, your garden hose, where the location and size of how they're being created on the screen. Physics is how they move on the screen. Particles are the shapes, and extras are just little oddball things that they didn't have any other place to put. Okay, so far so good. What do you guys think? Any questions on that? Yes, no, indifferent. Okay, let's see what we can do with this then. Let's actually do something, as it were. In this particular, what I'm doing tonight, reset, obviously is my friend. But even simple things, for example, say I want to make a sort of starry background. I could go to make the birth rate. This gets into, 2's fine. Make their longevity like 10. But if it was a star field, I would definitely want it covering the whole area. So under producer, I would go into the radius. And I can set up the X and Y, say at 0.5, 0.5. You can see how the garden hose is expanding each time I click. And also, I recommend you can see that it's just falling stars. So under physics, I would probably go into, explosive is fine. But let's do gravity to 0, velocity to 0. Okay, so you can see it's sort of, that's a lot of stars. Also, it's not as a producer. Need to make my radius a little bit bigger. Cover the whole screen. There we go. So we got that. You can see how it's just filling more and more and more. Actually, I think let's set this back down a ways. Okay. Particles. Stars. Stars should be a lighter color. There we go. And it's filling up the night sky. We could make them twinkle by indeed having a shorter lifespan. This is more for, I think, a Las Vegas commercial, don't you think? But we could also go in and add, blurs and things like this. Setting this up is one of those, this is where artisticness comes in, is what look and feel are you trying to achieve. I mean, we could even make these things vastly smaller. No, it's too small. There we go. So that's a very extraordinarily simple thing to do. Okay. Can you start and stop the filter? That is an excellent question. The answer to it is not in the way you can think, there's no on-off switch for the filter itself. I mean, you can hide it from view. But if you think about it, if you want the stars to stop, you've got to control what? The birth rate and longevity. So, for me to stop the stars from being made, I would need to keyframe the birth rate. It's the letter U. Now I'm hitting the letter U on my keyboard so I can see that keyframe I just made. And I can actually go hit page up, page down, right, it's the other way. And I can set then the birth rate to 0. In 1 frame's time, it then makes this many stars, because they all put them on the screen, and then all of a sudden, this is where the longevity comes in. So if I want that many to stay on the screen, I have to keep it as long as I need it. So from this point on, I get these stars, but no more are born. And they stay on as long as I get my seconds. If I don't want to have the size change, then I make the birth rate and death size the same. But remember, it all comes down to keyframes. And if I don't want the audience to see that, I just slide over those keyframes to the left before the audience sees them. And it goes like that. Again, if I want to keep the size the same. See, 0.25. 0.25. Way too big, Eric. 0.02. 0.02. There we go. There's just some stars in the sky in the background, randomly generated. And they will fade out unless I give them more time on the screen. Longevity. So I can throw that in as a background. And I can add twinkling one, like I said, if I change the birth rate, death rate, I can add more, subtract more, and just play with it a little bit more that way. So that's how I do a starry sky at night and how I can start and stop this filter. Just 2 simple keyframes on the birth rate. Okay. All right. Now that's the bare bones basic of the of this. But this filter does so much more. That's why I have this handout. This handout, by the way, normally I spend almost an entire evening on just this one thing, because this is a lot of hands-on time for you guys. So I do recommend taking my handout and going with it. Okay. So for example, I'm going to go ahead, and one thing about this is after this next one, we're going to take this, the composition, and then we're just going to keep duplicating it, adding more and more each time. So new composition. Okay. I'm going to call this starry text. Sure, why not? Layer new solid. Go with the same thing. Particle world. CC. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is I'm going to need some text to do this, because I'm going to actually put some text into my, so I'm going to call this one text. And just type in. Now for this I want really large text. To 1 line only. And this is one of those things you got to do things exactly my way my handout says, or it doesn't make any because all the numbers and settings are designed exactly for this information. So I'm going to go in. So I got my text, got my story text. So I'm going to go into story text, grab my text comp, and throw it in here. So there's my text on top of underneath my particle effect. You can see that they're on top of each other. I could have typed in the text and pre-comped it as well, but it doesn't really matter which way you go with that. Okay, so actually I did this a little bit backwards from my instructions. I should have practiced this. So I'm going to duplicate actually this, and I'm going to put, where am I? Did I close that? Shame on me. Okay. Now my text has vanished once again. Because on this layer, obviously, it wipes out everything on there. Now for this, I'm going to do a couple tricks here. I'm going to set the birth rate to 10. Longevity to 10 is already there. Now it's to 1. What am I doing? 10. So now then I want to make this a little bit bigger, so I'm going to go under Producer, so it fill in my screen. Radius X and Y. I'm going to make this 0.75. So I got it filling it all the way in. Okay, then I'm going to, under Physics, I'm going to set the velocity really slow, 0.1. And then I'm going to set the gravity to 0. So I get that big filled size of things. Okay, so what I just did, hopefully I wasn't going too fast. But basically I set the birth rate to 10 and the longevity to 10, so it's the length of my comp. Under Producer, I just made the radius full screen. And under Physics, I slowed it down to 0 gravity and almost no velocity, so it just fills up like that. Okay. So the next little thing I want to do is I want to go under Particles and under Particle Maps, color mapping, excuse me. Okay. There's an option here called Original Constant, which is not a good label for what this really does. Now you'll notice that I've got text, other things. Remember that whole business about alpha channels and stuff that we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks? This allows me to pull in an alpha channel. And lets my text do that. Because what's happening here, and why I left on the other one, is it's pulling in the text information and using the outline of it, the alpha channel, as a stencil or a cutout, depending upon how you want to phrase it. So the particles only flow through that information. And because I give it a little bit of velocity, it's just pushing it out, and gravity is not letting it drop down because there is no gravity. So what do you guys think? Questions? Is this microphone on? It is kind of cool. I mean, it really is Again, it gets into, once you start learning about these filters, you discover there's so much more under the hood. It's always a shame that more people don't dig down deeper. But it's also important to understand the concepts that are going on. The other thing is, why are the particles red? Why isn't it grabbing this birth death? Notice that's grayed out now that I've chosen original concept. That's because on my text layer, it's grabbing that red lettering. So if I were to change it to any other color, I do enough blue, let's do that. Go back to my comp. Can I use a shape instead of text? Yep. As long as it's got a good alpha channel on there, you're good to go. Can you see why I spent some time in Photoshop talking about that little task? But the text is more impressive in class. What can I say? That's why I go with it. And besides, I can type it in. And keep in mind that because I have this on its own individual comp, I can simply change the text. It pulls it into the other information. And I've got, it all comes down to whether or not it has an alpha channel that it can read and stuff. So if you're looking at the PDF handout, that was step number 2, or example number 2. Just to let you know where we're hanging out. So you guys think that was pretty interesting, huh? It is, you know, it's something you don't see and think about. But again, it just becomes something very different. So let's take this exact same information and do something else with it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to... Okay, I'm going to go back in here and change it back to my name because I want a few more letters in there. There we go. Okay. So taking this concept, you've got to imagine that we can even do more with it. So I'm going to take the composition, this composition here called Starry Text, and I'm going to make a copy of it, which is just plain edit, duplicate, and then rename it. Call this Sandy Text. Double click on it to open her up. Right now it's the exact same thing. And I think also I should go back into my text. Yeah, let's make this white text just for the fun of it. Okay, there's the white text. Okay, so let's do something different with this. This is example number 3, which is the second side of my handout. Okay, and it has a little bit more going on with it, so we gotta play with it a little bit more. So to start with, we duplicated it just to save ourselves time from having to redo all this stuff. And we're going to go into the producer. And we're going to set the X radius, the right-left radius, to 0. And immediately you can see that what's happening with this is the garden hose is tall and skinny, which is a whole different look and feel. But as you can see, it's just putting particles out through the middle of this thing. It's kind of cool with that. But we know that we made it full size, so it stretches above it and below. Okay. The next thing we actually are going to do is we're going to play with the positioning of all this. Like I said, this is one of those times we want to play with the, bring up my outline so you can see there's the tall, skinny producer, that red little line there. So for this side, by the way, if you were to change the size of the comp, these numbers would be vastly different, just to let you know. But because I can move the producer, I'm going to actually move right, left, X, 0, 0, 0, and move it all the way over. So that should be about 0.5 to the, I know it's negative 0.5, my bad, I can't type. So it's actually at the start, the left-hand side. And I'm going to keyframe that. I'm then going to go to the very end and make that positive 0.5. And look what happens the moment I do that. Because the producer is moving now, it's spreading particles all the way across the screen as we go. Now, obviously, if I were to change the speed of the particles and other things, I could actually make the letters visible, but that's not the trick I'm trying to pull here. Okay, any questions so far? Does that make sense? Okay. So the next thing I want to do is go in and play with my physics. And I'm going to actually set the gravity here to 1. As we know, what happens? The gravity falls down. Oh, I made my producer. I gotta go back in. Remember when I said the producer needed to be 0.5 and I made it 75? Yeah. There we go. Now watch what happens. Because I just increased the gravity to 1, the particles fall. Now what does that look like if I have the text on the screen? Yep, they're falling exactly where the lettering is. So say I want to make it look like I am literally disintegrating those letters. Well, in that case, I need to make the solid letters vanish in the same time that the producer is going by. So I have to time this, but I know what the timing is because I've got the keyframes for the positioning already. So on the actual text itself, I'm going to just simply use another effect, which is a transition called a linear wipe, which is designed to literally remove information similar to what we might do with a mask. And with this, I want a 0, 0, 0. The way the linear wipe, by the way, you could change the angle and do other things with it, but basically it's a 0 to 100%. Right now it's 0, meaning it's not doing anything, but we'll keyframe it because we want to start there. And at the very end, we want it to go to 100%. Because we want by the end of this 10 seconds, we want it to be wipe out all the information. So we come back here to the beginning and look at how the timing is. Now, can I take this a step further? Well, yeah, I can make it look better. I can play with the feathering. Also, I'm not really thrilled with getting that producer, the radius X. Don't want it too big. Close enough. So as you can see, I'm more or less dusting my letters for you who are Marvel MCU fans. So what do you guys think? You can see it's vastly different than what we had done when we were using the particles to make letters and them coming out of the letters. Now they're technically coming out of the one layer letters, but we're using gravity and everything to our control, allowing them to dust, and then using the linear wipe to do that. But we can take this a step further, believe it or not. Coming back to this grid here. Remember I referred to this earlier? This is the floor, which is under physics. Ah, the floor. By the way, just to let you know, if you have a much, much earlier version of After Effects, one of the standalone disks, the floor options are actually, there's a button at the top called Options of this filter, a particle world. You would click that and that would bring up the floor. You know, one of those weird design things. So if you have, like I said, an ancient version, that's where that's located. And the answer, the question on the thing is, I mentioned, Dustin, can you change the gravity? Yeah, it's all keyframeable. But let me show you something, the reason why I chose this gravity 1%, which is the floor options. Right now, the floor is not activated, meaning that floor action set to none. But there are three choices. I can tell the floor to act like ice. Now watch what happens. So when it hits the grid, I can have the particles spread out because it's like ice. They're just sliding along. But I can also take this, and besides ice, I can tell it to act like glue, like sticky paper. And you can imagine what that happens now. So the particles just hit the floor and stay there. And yes, the floor can be adjusted to, so if you're trying to line something up with a table, a chair, or an actual floor in a video or a still image, you can line up that grid with it. So things will make it look like it really is hitting those objects. Then the third option under floor, which is always fun, is called bounce. Which is a little combination of ice and glue, because it hits the floor and bounces, and there's a whole series of 3 different bounce controls that you can play with to give it the exact look and feel that you want. So a lot comes down to, what do you want this to look like? Yes, the reason I have the gravity set at 1, is of course to get this floor thing working. If I had the particles going up into space for the dusting, I couldn't demonstrate this. Next question is, can I change the density of the particles? Well, think about it for a second. What controls the density? Back to birth rate. How many particles do I want? Do I want lots and lots of particles? Do I want lots of, well, it's easier to type in a small amount. 0.1. That isn't quite, that's a little too small, but you get the idea of creating, density and stuff. Yeah, that doesn't look right, does it? New. Let's try that again. There we go. But you can also see the subtlety of each one of these numbers. By changing them just a little bit, it gives me a slightly different look and feel. Okay, so you get lots and lots of possibilities here. There's no right or wrong answer. It all comes down to, what do you want this to look like? And how do you want it to feel to the audience and to your piece? Of course, you notice if you get rid of bounce and go back to, say, glue, you lose all the bounce options. They gray out immediately. But I have no idea what artistically you're trying to achieve at this point. But this just gives you an idea. The point of my handouts and showing you this, of course, is to show you how much deeper you can go with a lot of these filters. Some of these things are just amazing. Some people use the particle effects just to make, like, nighttime skies. And it's like, there's a lot more you can do with that and stuff. Obviously, at this time in the class, I'd be walking around. You guys be going nuts playing with this and having a lot of fun. because, like I said, just going in. And also keep in mind, I could change the different types of animation. I could go in and change the particles themselves. Not lines, we could do stars. Pixie dust, everyone. Actually, for that, we probably want to bounce them, don't you think? Stars, bubbles, cubes. Very strange stuff, right? Let's go back to lines just for the hay of it, because that just demonstrates what. Now I should also point out that the rendering time on this increases. The more you add particles, the more it's going to take you to render it. Just a heads up. Because think about it, it's got to calculate the math on each one of those little itty bitty particles. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Any questions on this before I show you more options, more possibilities? What if I want the particles to circle? Okay, two things. Float in the wind. I'm not sure exactly what you want me to do with that, whether you want them like to bounce up and away. But let me answer the second question first. Then, okay, can I get particles to circle the text and do what I need it to make the shape? The answer is yes and no. Okay. Again, it depends upon what you're trying to achieve. Because think about it. There's not an automatic way for it to automatically trace something. And trust me, it would take a long time to do that. But we can animate the position of the particles. There's a whole X, Y, Z here. So I could animate it to go around and things like that. Also, Particle World 2 does a little bit better. So you get into these weird things. I would also like to point out that you can go out and buy and download more particles more particle emitters. Software that does this even more fancy than what we're seeing here. So just one of those things, keep in mind. As for the animation, it doesn't follow a path. You actually have to animate it yourself with this particular piece of software. The more fancier ones would follow a path. You just basically say, outline it and away it goes. If we get some more time, I might try doing that. We'll see how that goes. But the earlier question was, can I make the particles change? And the answer is yeah. If I wanted to change gravity, -1, there they go. And then I, of course, could animate that. If I want them to spread out and stuff, I would play with the speed, velocity, and then also probably change the producer to give me different widths and stuff. Let me go back and reset this back to 1 until I get my floor going, because we're about to do what you're suggesting in just a second here. We're going to change the sand here into smoke as the next section. Okay. So to do that, once again, I'm going to take all this information, duplicate that comp. The reason I'm duplicating is just save myself time, and also so I can come back and look at these. If you guys have questions, so I go edit, duplicate, or Command D, and renaming this will make your life so much easier. So I'm going to call this Smoky. Smoking text. Yeah, I'll smoke this sucker. Open that up, double click. Okay, so we're in the exact same point. However, this time I'm going to hide the physical text itself. Okay. So what we want to do here is once again it's like the starry text where the text is coming through. So with the smoking text, wrong one, there we go, right layer. I'm going to reset everything again, or not hit the reset button. I'm going to make changes because I like that animation of it going across. So I'm going to change the under particles. I'm going to go into faded spheres, darken faded spheres. I'm going to change the birth rate way up to 50. We're going to have a freaking lot of particles now. Under physics, I'm going to make negative gravity so everything floats up, -1. Okay, now watch what happens. I'm literally making smoke. So I can, of course, make it go up in smoke. So is that what you're thinking of, Max? Making my stuff float away in the wind? Obviously, I change the angles and stuff to make it go in a different direction. So that was pretty simple and straightforward. Any questions on that? Like I said, basically all I did was change the way the particles looked, change the direction, and added a lot more particles to give a more filling up in smoke appearance. Now, let's talk about subtle changes. Remember I told you that velocity is what, smoke coming out. I want to change the hold on. Why isn't it doing what I want it to do? Resistance should not be set to grayed out or set to 0. Of course it's not. Every so often the piece of software does something that even surprises me a little bit. Okay, reset. Birth rate 50. Longevity 10. Explosive is fine. We want the velocity to be pretty high. Gravity we want -1. Resistance I want, this is what I've been trying to do. I want the resistance way up to 50. And, oops. I want a tall, skinny. And now I have to redo my animation. Keyframe -5. Oops. -0.5. Yeah. End of the timeline. Yeah. Well, look at that for a second. And we want that to be 50. There we go. Back to my faded spheres. Let's see if I got my stunt or trick to go. Almost, not quite. What should happen is have the stunt I was trying to do. Was it supposed to use the lettering to spell things out? There we go. Because I've got to set the velocity too high. There we go. I had to redo it from scratch. For some odd reason, my resistance was grayed out. I must have hit something along the way. But basically, if you look at that, we're doing the exact same thing we were doing before. We are having the lettering come out of the letters, like so. But we're having a very low velocity, so it's not coming out very strong, and increase the resistance to the point where they all stay together. But yet there's enough gravity to pull them up. And if I needed to move slower, rather than play with the keyframes of the producer and stuff, I could just change the gravity to something less, minus 0.5. So it would just go up much slower. It's a silly little thing, but again, I wanted to demonstrate how just minute changes to the numbers can change the way this filter works, and a lot of other filters as well. Again, we only have a few more weeks left. I will be showing you more stuff, of course, but I want you to start thinking about the filters and other options and spend some time really reading the information that you see under these options. What do you think velocity means versus gravity versus resistance, and stuff, and fiddle with them. And it will give you lots of nifty little options. But again, it comes into how do the layers interact with each other and what sort of fun stuff you can do with it. But it is fun, isn't it? Let's see, I haven't done this for a while. Let's see if we can change the... And by changing the way it comes out, it gives you very, very subtle changes. Fire by itself wants to go down, despite my gravity tendency. Okay. Okay, question. So, Max, does that do your particles in the wind? Give you a good feel for it there? The combination of the two things? The other thing I should point out is I could also duplicate that top layer that's making the particles and have two layers doing slightly different things to give it a different look and feel. I should warn you, this is one of those filters that's a giant time sink. You can spend hours with it. But that's one of the reasons I made the handout and I'm showing you this tonight, to give you guys an idea of what can be done and the way to play with it. Okay? Because there's a lot of fun things going on here. I mean, you may come up with something that I haven't even thought of, because even I've not played with every single option under here. But it is a lot of fun to play with. So anything else? Anybody else? Or go on to the next little example I have here. The next one is actually pretty simple. It's going to once again take this. I'm going to stop it from playing. There we go. I'm going to take my smoking text, duplicate it. Again, I can't recommend enough about naming your comps and layers and items correctly so you can find them again. I'm going to call this one fire text. Double click on it, bring it out. All right. So this right now I'm in the same spot as before, but I'm going to actually go back into my physics and I'm going to get rid of that resistance. No resistance. Whoops. Some resistance. Actually, the one I really wanted was, okay. I'm going to go into Sandy text because I reset the other one. I don't want to. Sandy text, duplicate it, rename it, fire text 2. This has become easier to do on this one because I did everything from scratch. I missed one of these things. Okay, so in this one, all I need to do here is to change, to get it to where I want it to be, is to change the gravity to -1. So it goes up. And our particles, use faded spheres again. And I think I'm going to need to boost up the number of particles. And that will send me to where I should be if I was doing my handouts. So once again, that's the smoky text before I start playing with it crazy like before. So in order to do this next one, I'm going to do some color correction so I can change the color from smoke to fire. And for that I go Effects, Color Correction, and I'm about to show you the most bizarre filter on the planet called Colorama. Yep. Which basically maps the colors that it finds and rebroadcasts them around the color wheel. Fortunately, they have a lot of pre-made stuff in here, including one called Fire. So it changes my faded spheres from bright red to dark red. So each little bubble gets its own little effect. Now, if I also go in and add in a blur, let's do it. Yeah, let's increase that. Too much. Now I've got not just smoke, but fire. I'm glad to see somebody has typed in the word, this is fun. You can see why I just love this piece of software. It's a blast. It's amazing what you can think of and stuff. And I often watch other people's tutorials because even I look at YouTube stuff and I was like, oh, I didn't think of that. Right. If you mix those two things together, you get that result. Yeah. It's all sorts of coolness. In some respect, this fire one works better than the smoke, I think, of literally burning it away. Yeah, if you recall, way back at the beginning, the first time I talked about filters, many, many weeks ago, I told you if you like Photoshop filters, you're going to love this because this is like Photoshop filters on steroids. So many more options, so many more possibilities, and best yet, you can animate them. You can get this to work and stuff. Let's see, my handout recommended 23. Let's see what that looks like. That's okay. Actually, I prefer this time I prefer the smaller number. So that's 3 filters to get that. By the way, the Colorama one is the weirdest thing on the planet. I've never successfully taught this in class without losing everybody. But basically, it is, again, what they call remapping, where you have black to white. Here is an example. 100% black to 100% white. And then every tick point is a percentage of black to white, all the way from 100% black to 100% white. And it allows you to change the color of it. So for example, this is what the red ramp looks like. So that's a pure gradient from 100% black to 100% red with green, blue, and old-fashioned gray. But because you can actually go in there, it gives you a chance to create different color looks and feels. Yes, even though I'm doing it with fire/smoke, you get the idea. This is highly customizable. You all sorts of different looks and feels. fire and smoke. We have more black for the smoke and a little bit more white. That's because these little triangles can be added and subtracted to give you different looks, because right now I'm remapping this one to 100% black. Stuff. You gotta be, oops, no. How you set these things up. But they've got so many presets nowadays. We normally just go in here and adjust what we like. Red, white, and a little bit of blue in there. Okay. Rust, more rust. Very popular. Sepia tones, shrink, sunset. Very interesting choices. So, you know, here's a true color wheel and stuff. Now, the thing about, of course, the color wheel is the phase spheres are literally, which we chose way back in Particle World here, is black and white. So it's reading that percentage of the, and applying that little information. That's why you don't see a lot of color changes in this. So weirdness, fun stuff, more things to play with. Yes, I regret I don't have time to cover every single filter under here, because this would take up the entire semester by itself, just each one of these. Don't worry, I'm hitting the high points. The filters I've shown you so far in class, and the filters I will be showing you for the next couple of weeks, are designed to give you a good grounding of ideas and concept of how these things work. But when it comes to like distortions, goodness gracious, again, this would be an entire night, if not more, going through each one of these things and stuff. Perspective, similar, simulation. Simulations is where we get all of our fun stuff. Balls, forms, shatter, our particle worlds as well, etc. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, what do you guys think so far? Can you see the difference, the subtle difference that we did on each one of these things? We started off with just simply having a starry night. And we can adjust how much it, oops. And we can adjust how much it, how the stars glitter by the start and end point of them. Make them appear and how long they last. Then we added in a second layer with an alpha channel and didn't change much in the way of, you know, just made sure that there was no gravity set. So the particles would come straight at the camera. So using that alpha channel in a way we wanted to. Then we had the fun of putting gravity back in and taking advantage of the floor, the grid underneath everything. So the particles would then hit the floor as we're going through. Then by having the gravity go the other direction, and then increasing the velocity, we got the particles to literally almost stick on the screen, just barely move to peel off. And then finally, we went back to almost the beginning of the smoking text and just added some color and some blur to it to give us that red burning fire. So, sounds good. What I hope you'll do during the week, obviously, while you're working on your final project is at least spend a little bit of time with my handout and try the numbers and go through it and then play with it yourself. Okay? It's pretty step by step. But I wanted you guys have the chance to play with it, have some fun with it. Okay. So what do you guys think? Questions before I go on? Okay. Remember, if you can't type fast enough, it's okay for you to unmute your microphone and talk to me. I discovered way back when in one of our meetings, teachers' meetings, when everyone was unmuted. Even when nobody was talking, it was just like too many people breathing. So that's why I muted all of you to start with. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is 10 of 8. This is probably a good time to take our break because the next filter combination I'm going to show you is actually more than one filter. Okay, it's going to show you how to combine layers together to get a unique look and feel. So let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break. So I'm going to stop the video. Pause recording. Zoom recording. Okay, from the top, just for the recording, is the handout called Moving Glass is going to recreate this look from the Miami CSI opening credits. Learning how to do this will teach you a lot about how filters, compositions, and everything works together. I've got the sound turned off intentionally so YouTube does not take the video down. So there's a lot to keep track of here. And naming the comps is like life or death, or you will definitely not be able to do this. So we start with a basic comp, and I always like to say stage. That's my final one, because this is where everything's going to go. I know that's my final. Some people like to call their final one final, but I like to call it the stage. Now, I found some really nifty video. I thought I did. Here's a jump. No. There it is. What I'm going to do. Yeah, it's a little too big. My handout actually, because when I started doing this, the computers were too slow. Couldn't really do this with video. But there's a nice Miami shot, right? Nice beach shot. So first things first, we're going to pre-comp this. I could have made its own comp, but we're just going to go layer, pre-composition, and we're going to call this footage, so we can change it later if we need to. So we now have a stage and one comp in it called footage. The next thing that we're going to need, step number 2, is we're going to need that moving glass. So we're going to need yet another composition. What do I call this? And from this composition, we're going to make those glasses from solids. So we're just going to go File, New, make a solid. This time it is important. This needs to be 100% white to do this trick. Okay. There's our white solid. Oops, not save. Just oops. Just go in. I'm going to make this bigger than, I scaled it up, but you get the idea. Okay. So this is going to be my moving glass. I'm going to actually want a couple of these things. So I'm going to go duplicate it, pull off the next one. Let's change the size. Scale. Make this one a little bit fatter. Pull the next one out. Scale. We're going to make this one a little bit thinner. There we go. Pull this one out. Break the link. There we go. So we have 3 different sizes. Now the next thing to do is to have them move around. So I'm just going to start one of them like off screen. There we go. The other one over here. This one here. Start with this one here. I really made that one too big, so we'll just go shrink it down. I like it, make it reasonably fat. Okay, so there we go. So we're going to start with that. Go in with position because we want to get that motion together. So I'm just going to start with the second one here. Yeah. Position. I'm going to make this one go halfway. I'm going to have it slide off the camera, off screen. Then I'm going to have it come back again. There's no rhyme or reason to why I'm doing this. I'm really doing this randomly. So you can do anything you want to with this. Next one is going to be my slow poke position. Position there. Go across. I'm just going to have it slowly go across the screen, which leaves this guy. It actually starts on the screen, which is fine. It's going to go about to here. Not get off the screen. Go back to that's because I've got this keyframe in here already. Go there. Then I'm going to have it come back again. So this guy's going to bounce all over the earth. And the final one, which is actually my first one, position, have them move at all different rates. Come back across. And then back again, maybe. Let's see how that looks. Keyframe. Now the thing is, this animation is random. That's fine. You can do anything you want. I could make it go up and down as well, but I'm just trying to keep this simple. Now the thing that's critical about this handout and doing this trick is once this is locked down, all the other features are going to be based on this particular animation. So this layer cannot be moved or changed once you get this. So you really want this animation to be what you want it to be. Okay. And I think that's kind of cool the way those pull apart. Gives a lot of change of direction, a lot of things going on. Okay. So I'm going to take that, go back to my stage, and put that on top of my footage. Which, of course, if I needed to, I can make adjustments, of course, and do that sort of thing. Okay, so far so good. Does what I just did make sense to everybody? All I did so far was make 3 comps. One was for the stage where I'm putting everything onto. One's for the footage, the video itself, or still image, or whatever I want to put on there. And third one is the animation of the white boxes. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to create those crazy distortions that you saw there. Now from that, I don't want to put that directly onto the glass itself because then my white boxes would become distorted. I wouldn't get that crisp edge. I definitely don't want to put on my footage, so I'm going to need an adjustment layer. So go Layer, New, Adjustment Layer. And then on my adjustment layer, I'm going to want to put a few and I'm rereading my handout because even I forget all these steps. It's not like I do this one every single day. The one thing I forgot to do back in my moving glass was I wanted to make those 3D. And you'll see why when I come back. So when I go back to the stage, I don't need them 3D here, but I'm going to do the lighting effect, and this layer needs 3D to do lighting. So it's a little step through. Okay. So with adjustment layer, I'm going to go So I'm going to sit here and add in some filters. So I'm going to go Effects. Let's go with a blur and sharpen. And what blur do I want to use? Gaussier blur. That's probably good. Bring that up to 6. Now notice because of the adjustment layer, I am making this look wrong, but trust me, it will be fine. Okay. And also I'm going to put in a distortion. Now, actually, before I do the distortion, remember how you can put video inside of text? Well, I'm going to put these white boxes inside this adjustment layer. So I'm going to make this a track matte Luma. The box themselves really don't have an alpha channel, so I'm going to use Luma instead. And notice by doing that, once I made this a Luma track matte, it joined these two things together. So the adjustment layer did not change the footage below it. It now has merged these two together. Now it's kind of hard to see, so just give me a second. So back on my adjustment layer, I'm going to go Effects, Distort, and I think I'm going to put Transform, because Transform allows me to move the pixels up, down, right, left. So I'm going to move those up 370. I'll show that. Okay. Didn't need to do that. Anchor point. There we go. I'm going to shift their position a little too far down. That's why I wanted to make them a little taller than necessary. But now you can see these lines going through there. And I forgot, yeah, you can use the alpha channels as well. So I'm starting to get this look and feel of these glass edges to my project. As a matter of fact, I think I actually even do scale, increase the pixels. That's 120. There we go. Now you can really see the distortion go on. So by creating all these different layers and compositions, I'm able to make this a little bit different, make it look more interesting. So I've got the footage playing. I've got a layer with moving glass with the white boxes moving around. and the adjustment layer actually doing the heavy lifting of the filters, the distortions. But because I've told it to make it an alpha track matte, the white boxes are now filled with the adjustment layer options. Okay? So this is a radically different way of thinking how to use adjustment layers, because adjustment layers traditionally only impact the things below it. Now keep in mind, because I have these two linked together, the moving glass and the adjustment layer, if I put something above here, it has no impact whatsoever. Okay? So does that make sense to everybody? So far, so good? Okay. Okay, so we're going to now take this, and this is not bad looking, but we can beef it up. We can do other things with it to make it a little bit more lively. For example, we can make yet another new composition. This thing makes comps out of the brain. And we're going to call this one Glass Light. And we're going to grab the comp called Moving Glass, put it on here. Again, we're going to grab the 3D options, cube, things like this. Layer, new, light. And we're going to make a spotlight and all of the regular things. Where did my light go? There we go. And there is my spotlight. So I move it out, I get a lot of this. The reason for the spotlight in doing this is I'm going to make a sheen on the glass. I'm going to make it a little reflective. Beyond, it's another type of distortion. Now my wave is breaking on the right hand side, so I think that's a good place to put it. This is a very subjective look and feel depending upon what you're trying to make it look like. Okay, so if I hit play now, you can see how I get that nice curvature of the light, brightness, darkness. Again, I'm doing this I'm going to make a sheen on the glass. Okay. So I go back to my stage. Yay. I'm going to grab my composition. Glass light, there we go. I'm going to put it above this. And of course, at this point in time, what happens? Well, it is the copy of the white boxes with the lights on them, so it's covering everything up. So this is why I need to use a blend mode, our famous, things. Blend modes allow me to literally mix layers together in different ways. Darken, multiply, all these things. This is the same stuff we learned in Photoshop way back in the day. So in this case, I'm thinking I'm going to use it as an additive and take a look at it. And you can already see the sheen through it. That may be way, way too bright. Now I could play with other blend modes and see what it is. Lighten. Problem is now I'm seeing the white. Screen, no, still look good. Overlay. Now overlay is interesting. I could have also gone back into the other one and play with the light, make it brighter, less bright, etc. Again, there's a lot of artistic choices in this, but I'm sort of digging the overlay, even though that's not on my handout, because it actually gives it more of a sunset feel to it, because it really darkens it up. So that's actually kind of cool. Any questions so far? Can you change the color of the moving glass? You can add a tint to it is what I recommend. But be careful using any of the color adds, because what you'll end up with is making the white boxes solid again, and they won't give you that translucence that we're trying to achieve. But again, there's a lot of things to play with. But adding a tint to this layer would achieve, you'll notice how using just the overlay option has made this much more darker and orange than the rest of it. Now, stop it. We'll stop for a second here. Now, one of the things that we can also do, again, like I said, I'm cramming a lot into this, is let's talk about, again, adding itty bitty little touches to this. So for example, say I want to put an edge on this, because you'll notice that some of these options, way back, see if I can find, you notice that there's like a little beveled edge on some of these. So let's try achieving that look and feel again. So to do that, we're going to actually need to make a series of compositions, because that doesn't come out of nothing. So we're going to make a new composition, and we're going to call this bevel -1. Okay, and we want to actually go into moving glass, grab all these layers, copy them. So I'm going to go edit, copy, go to bevel 1 and hit edit, paste. Yes, I could use the keyboard command, but in the video you wouldn't see that. Okay, then I'm going to take this and duplicate this. Oops. Edit, duplicate, and then I have bevel 2. So they're again totally identical. Then I'm going to make a third composition. Yeah, this is how complicated this can get. And I'm going to call this bevel combined. This is why naming, when you get these many layers, putting them together. Which of course what I want to do is I want to grab bevel 1, bevel 2, put them in combine. That makes sense. And right now you'll see that they're totally identical with each other. You can't see any difference. However, if I were to go in and make a track matte, oops, actually, they should vanish actually. And of course it's not doing it because I missed a step. Okay, because it does think it's a track matte. To layer. Track matte. Yeah, same thing. Alpha inverted. There they are. Sorry, chose the wrong one. You can see actually when I move these things, actually I position them just a little bit off. The whole point of this is because they're supposed to be identical, you should see actually 100% black because they're canceling each other out. But if you were to move these XY, you get a little pixel of edge on each one of these things from the animation. Now, if I wanted to, if I didn't make them tall and skinny and just had regular squares, cubes, circles, or whatever, I could position them in other XYs. And yes, these do not have to be rectangles. I'm just trying to keep this as easy as possible. Okay. Now that I've got the edges there, if I go back to the stage, choose Bevel Combined, put that on top of everything else, and let's go ahead and make that also an overlay. not 100% white, but you can see there's just a slight edge. See that little sharp, few pixels of edges in there? And that is how you do the Miami Vice title sequence. Now we could even go in and make yet another new layer. Oops. Of course, that's not going to work because I didn't have everything selected. Now, of course, because it's on top, none of that impacts, but if I were to go put it above the footage, because again, adjustment layers, everything flows down. I could put that into its own comp as well. Of course, I could also, animate it. Beginning. Just do a simple one. Get it halfway there. Down to the center of the screen. There we go. But anyhow, I just wanted to demonstrate, besides all the blending modes and stuff, of course I could also get back into those blending modes, make some adjustments if I didn't like the way the lighting looked. I originally had this too bright. Get back into the light. Without the text tool, there we go. There we go. There's one big sheen of light in the middle right-hand side. I like the response of a lot of work for such a little thing. And yes, welcome to the world of motion graphics. Look at how many comps I had to do to make each one of those steps. But on the other hand, look at my results too. Did I need to make the beveled edge, the little edge there? No, but it's little details like that that really raises your work above and beyond everything else. Did I need to add the lighting sheen? As a matter of fact, I could turn off the light just by hiding the layer. Okay, this is without the light. This is with the light. Without. With. Does add a little extra. Is it the right thing to do? Who knows? I mean, we all have to make decisions in that respect. Do I want to use the beveled edges? Turn them off. You don't need the beveled edges, but you'll notice that, again, you know how I always talk about you need that 1 pixel of outline and stuff? Adding that little beveled edge, as you can see, just makes the edge pop out so much more. So it really comes down to little subtleties like that and stuff. Now, of course, if I don't like my footage, I can grab something else, put, even with a still image, this works. And by the way, if you have a slow computer, don't use the video, use one of these still images instead, because it will speed up your rendering process immensely. but because I've got the time, I'm going to go ahead and keep the video going. Okay, so let's take a look at this for a second. Zoom in. So it all starts with the footage. This is where, the background, literally my background. We can ignore the text for a second. Everything revolves around the moving glass composition, which has my 4 boxes going around. From that, I had created the adjustment layer, and these 2 layers together create the distortion. Using the alpha channel information, the moving glass, I put all these filters inside the boxes as opposed to impacting the entire area below it. So tying those 2 together does that. The glass light just adds that little sheen. Again, that's a real optional thing, but it's important to understand. And the reason why they don't look like white boxes is because I added a blend layer of additive, so that those pixels are added to the moving glass ones, which are made transparent by the adjustment layer down below here. The bevel edges is a combination of 2 copies of the moving glass, and they're canceling each other off through a alpha track, through the tracking mode. I'll get it out eventually, honest to God. And by moving a couple over a few pixels to each other, I get that very sheen edge. And once again, I use the overlay, or I could use additive or one of the other ones to make it more look. So again, so everything looks transparent through there. But you can see that edge. And you can see the distortion and stuff. But this is the sort of amount of work that you're looking for if you want to turn in a professional product. Okay, because you do a little thing. You just do the background, then you do the animation. You go, okay, how can I make this a little bit more interesting? Then you add in the next layer to that, the next portion. And then can you do anything else with that? It's always based upon how much time you have, of course. But by adding in that little beveled edge there, when it crosses the threshold, it really does give you lots and lots of choices and options. And allows you to play with fun, have more fun with it. So those are the fun things that are going on. And again, you can play with this, you can add in even more stuff. We can do more fancier animation with the text. We can do all sorts of crazy things, etc. But you can see why naming my layers and compositions were critically important. Otherwise, I would never be able to keep track of which one's which. And how I had to build each one to put one thing inside of the other, inside of another, mix them together, and eventually I got what I was looking for. When we look at video such as like the Miami CSI here, we professional, people look at this and goes, okay, how did they do that? What was it involved? And stuff. You can see there's a little bevel edge in some of these. Some of them have them, some of them don't. And it all comes down to, like I said, this one doesn't. But you can see how many more, boxes they use for this literally 1 to 2 seconds shot. And they use a lot of different, actually I think they did several different comps on this one so they could blend them together, give light, dark, additive, subtractive, which works for the tall buildings here. It emphasizes the height and stuff. The other thing to keep in mind is not, when you look at these things, is they don't do these randomly. They spend a lot of time thinking about them, thinking about what are they trying to say and do, the details. Why are we have these numbers? Why do we have 4 of these? Why, why is this duplicated so much stuff? Of course, it helps to have good footage to begin with. Now, even this one, which is the opening of the elevator sequence, there. They took the moving boxes for that. What is it? That's not even 1 freaking second. And had all the boxes move from the center outward to emphasize the elevator opening. Doesn't that add a lot more to the elevator? Just this short sequence. Hello. There we go. The one thing you'll notice is it's missing all the text. When I download this, there's a lot of things missing on it. The stars' names and things like that. Those little rogue boxes here is where they would have put those in. And for some other reason, this person looped the video twice, which is fine. It makes it good for the class. I also included this, by the way, in my handout. The folder download. That's why it's so freaking big. And stuff. So what do you guys think? Questions, ideas, thoughts? You guys are so quiet. You've all gone away. Okay, well, I'd like to remind you, of course, that your project number 4s are due next week. And like I said, then we'll spend a lot of time next week discussing project number 5, which is the big one. It's the final project of the semester. It is where you get to demonstrate with me what you've learned in class. And it will be about 30% of your grade too. So that's important. I don't want you guys to focus too much on that. I want you to finish project 4. And then we'll get into project number 5 and stuff. Okay, so open up the floor to questions, not just about what we've been doing this evening, but also anything else for the semester. How is this doing things from home working for you guys? I know it's frustrating to be stuck at home, but is this online teaching reasonably good? Because it looks like we're going to be going this way with the fall semester, or at least that's the game plan at this point in time, although that's subject to change at any moment. Like the school can make up its mind sometimes. Too many bureaucrats trying to make decisions on top of each other. But I will be asking you over the next couple of weeks, is there anything I can do to make this class better to be online than just me talking and demonstrating this stuff? So I want you to put your thinking caps on for that one and stuff. Considering I had to make it up as I was going, I think we're doing okay. Have you guys been watching the videos or repeating the class videos for later reference and stuff out of curiosity? See a couple of yeses there, yeah. So, well, yeah, some of them, yeah. Not all of them need to be there. Stuff I can probably take down on my YouTube channel. I can probably take down the videos, which are the ones that are chopped up into little bitty pieces. Yeah, is there a place to see the samples for project number 4? Yeah, we did record that as a separate video. I can't put that up on the YouTube channel. You have to go to the Zoom channel to do that because the music and stuff is copyrighted, and I didn't want I didn't want to get the channel shut down because of that. But if you recall, when I was we were doing project 3 to project 4, project 4 samples were was its own mini movie. I did a thing there. So you're going to have to go back through the emails and look for the links and stuff. Even I'd have to dig through them to find out exactly which one it is. So 1 through 4, 15%. Oh, where's the rest? Well, if you read the syllabus, which is on the, yes, 1 through 4, 10% is considered participation, which, if you read the handout, is a combination of attendance, things in class, and, which is going to be different from this. I think this is going to change, so you have to bear with me. And obviously, your online things. Zoom, YouTube, and Canvas track everything you download and do. So I will be generating that into the calculation of participation. Okay? And that will be in the that is in the syllabus from day one. Although, like I said, I'm probably, attendance is a radically different idea with this online, but it'll take a small part of it and stuff. But if you do very well with projects 1 through 5, you shouldn't have an issue with anything on participation, because 10% of the grade is not enough to alter an A grade. Down below, you go from a plus to a A. Keep in mind, I cannot give pluses and minuses. The computer system doesn't allow it. This is one of the bizarre things about Santa Monica. Canvas, I have to do everything in points. The actual training in the grades have to be alphanumeric. I mean, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it's one of those, can't we just do one system, people? Okay. So any other questions from you guys? I will stay online and answer any questions if you want to talk to me privately or anything. The final will be due. God, I gotta get my calendar out now. Give me a second here. I do not have dates memorized, so please bear with me. Calendar. Where the frick is my calendar? I have it on the monitor, which you guys cannot see, so. Assignments. Okay. The final project will actually be due on the 8th. Okay, June 8th. So by giving it to you next week, that's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's actually a little bit shorter than I'd like. Oh, I miscounted here. God, we lost one class when we switched over in some respects. Okay. How much energy do you guys have? Okay. I'm going to release and activate the project number 5. Let's talk about project number 5 tonight. No, that I won't have much time. Okay. Actually, we're running out of time. That's okay. We'll just do it. We'll keep it the way I have it scheduled. It gives you slightly less time, but that's okay. We'll get it. You guys will get it done. But basically, technically speaking, the project's due on the 8th. That way I can grade it, get it up, and we can watch them on the 15th. That also gives a chance for people who are late an extra week to get it done. So we're going to keep that schedule going on there, okay? So we'll talk vastly more about that. I want to give it more than just the half an hour or so that I would have this evening, because I want to show lots and lots of examples next week. It'll probably take up half the class. Okay? Any other questions? We went through that a little faster than anticipated, but then again, as you know, I get very excited and like to talk a lot. And I just keep going and going and going. All right, that's a lot for you guys to think about. I hope that really helped you with filters and stuff. We are still going to be covering several other things over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be covering tracking, excuse me, a basic overview of tracking. Then we're going to be doing green screen. And the 25th is indeed a holiday, Memorial Day. There is no class on that date. So you won't be able to talk to me on that date. So on the 18th, we're doing tracking and handing out project number 5, Memorial Day, 25th. 6th is green screen. Project number 5 will be due on the 8th. And then we will, I got a special thing for that day, and then we'll do, the last class is the 25th. Is 5th, God, I keep my dates crossed up. Is on the 15th of June. Okay? Okay, now keep in mind, by the way, if you ever want to chat with me privately, at the bottom where you type in your thing, there's a thing to everybody, or you can just send a message to me. So keep in mind. So if you guys want me to stay on the line, chat with me separately, just, you can send me a private message and we get everyone else logged out and we can do it that way and stuff. But I think you guys have earned a little extra time off here. So why don't we go ahead and call it a night. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, or I should say stop recording. I'll try to get this up sooner than I did this past week. Sorry about that. Got busy and lost track of time.